Ladies and gentlemen, let's start with an image of polished surface, uncraqued, untarnished, perfect. It reflects light beautifully, but you can't see what's underneath. Many of us work hard to be that surface. We project an image of strength, control, and invulnerability. We act as if nothing bothers us anymore. But let me ask you something, does that truly feel like strength, or does it feel like armor? When we talk about vulnerability, it often gets a bad reputation. For many of us, the word conjures images of weakness, exposure, or loss of control. We associate vulnerability with being at the mercy of others, with admitting defeat, or with opening ourselves up to rejection. But what if I told you that vulnerability is not the opposite of strength, but its very foundation? In its simplest form, vulnerability is about showing up as you are, without guarantees. It's the willingness to risk emotional exposure, uncertainty, and even failure for the sake of what truly matters. Vulnerability is saying, this is me, these are my fears, my hopes, my flaws, and my dreams. It's about being real, even when being real is terrifying. And while it feels like an act of surrender, it's actually an act of immense courage. But why does vulnerability feel so hard? To understand this, we have to look at the culture we're steeped in. Most of us grow up learning that vulnerability is something to avoid. From a young age, we're taught to hide our feelings, to toughen up, and to power through life's challenges without showing cracks in our exterior. Phrases like, don't cry, keep a stiff upper lip, and fake it till you make it reinforce the idea that admitting struggle is equivalent to admitting failure. Over time, we internalize the belief that to be vulnerable is to be weak. And yet, in moments of true connection with others, what do we crave most? Authenticity, realness, the very qualities that vulnerability fosters. Think about a time when someone shared something deeply personal with you, a struggle they were going through, or a fear they had. Did you see them as weak, or did you admire their courage for letting you in? Chances are you felt closer to them, more connected. Their willingness to be vulnerable created a bridge between you. This is the paradox of vulnerability. While it feels like we're exposing ourselves to harm, it's actually the pathway to connection, resilience, and meaning. Pretending to be invulnerable might protect us from immediate discomfort, but it comes at a steep cost disconnection. When we build walls to keep pain out, we also keep love, joy, and belonging from reaching us. There's a common misconception that vulnerability is simply about wearing your heart on your sleeve or sharing every intimate detail of your life with anyone who will listen. But vulnerability isn't oversharing. It's about discerning when and where to show up authentically. It's about taking thoughtful risks, not reckless ones, with our emotions. It's the courage to say, this matters to me even when there's a chance we might fail. It's standing in front of a room, trembling with nerves, and delivering a message that comes straight from your heart. It's admitting, I don't have all the answers, or I need help even when you fear judgment. So why is vulnerability so powerful? For starters, it's the birthplace of all meaningful experiences. Think about the most important moments in your life, the ones that truly shaped you. Maybe it was telling someone you loved them for the first time, or trying something new and risking failure. Perhaps it was opening up about a past hurt, or deciding to pursue a dream that felt impossible. In every one of these moments, there was a degree of vulnerability. There was a risk involved. But without that risk, the reward, the connection, the growth, the transformation wouldn't have been possible. Another reason vulnerability is so powerful is that it fosters trust and intimacy. In relationships, whether personal or professional, people don't connect over perfection, they connect over humanity. Perfection might impress, but vulnerability inspires. When someone sees that you're willing to be real with them, it creates space for them to do the same. It's an unspoken agreement that says, I see you and I'm here with you. This is why vulnerability is at the core of strong teams, healthy relationships, and thriving communities. But vulnerability isn't just about connecting with others, it's also about connecting with ourselves. When we allow ourselves to feel deeply, whether it's joy, sadness, fear, or gratitude, we live more authentically. We stop running from our emotions and start learning from them. Vulnerability teaches us to sit with discomfort instead of numbing it, to face our fears instead of avoiding them, and to embrace our imperfections instead of hiding them. In doing so, we cultivate resilience, because the truth is, avoiding vulnerability doesn't protect us from pain, it only prolongs it. When we lean into our emotions, we build the strength to move through them and emerge stronger on the other side. Of course, vulnerability isn't without risk. To be vulnerable is to take a chance. And sometimes that chance doesn't pay off. Maybe the person you opened up to didn't respond the way you hoped, or the dream you pursued didn't turn out as planned. But even in these moments, there's growth. Vulnerability teaches us that failure isn't fatal and that rejection isn't the end of the story. It reminds us that we can survive disappointment, and in surviving, we become braver. In a world that often equates vulnerability with weakness, choosing to be vulnerable is a radical act. It's saying, I will not let fear dictate my life. I will show up even when it's hard. It's choosing courage over comfort, authenticity over perfection, and connection over isolation. It's deciding every day to live fully, not despite our vulnerability, but because of it. Every day, we face a choice to step into the world as our authentic selves or to shield ourselves with emotional armor. This choice often feels more complicated than it seems. Life teaches us, sometimes harshly, that being vulnerable can hurt. Maybe someone betrayed our trust, criticized us unfairly, or dismissed our feelings. Over time, these experiences push us to develop a kind of emotional armor, a protective shell designed to keep us safe. But while armor might shield us from pain, it also cuts us off from connection, growth, and joy. To understand the difference between armor and authenticity, let's start by defining them. Emotional armor is the set of defenses we use to protect ourselves from feeling hurt, judged, or exposed. It comes in many forms: perfectionism, disengagement, sarcasm, or pretending we don't care. Armor gives us a sense of control. It says, if I act like nothing bothers me, no one can hurt me. It's a tempting strategy, especially in a world that often equates vulnerability with weakness. Authenticity, on the other hand, is the opposite of armor. It's the courage to be seen as we truly are, our messy, imperfect human selves. Authenticity means showing up without pretense, embracing our emotions, and acknowledging that we don't have all the answers. It's saying, this is me, flaws and all, even when there's a risk that others might judge or reject us. The tension between armor and authenticity is something we all wrestle with. Think about a time when you felt exposed. Maybe you shared an idea in a meeting, admitted a mistake, or opened up to someone about your feelings. How did you react afterward? Did you second guess yourself, wishing you had kept quiet? Did you feel the urge to downplay your emotions or dismiss your own vulnerability? If so, that's the armor talking. It whispers you should have protected yourself. You let them see too much. But while armor feels protective, it's actually a trap. It might keep us from being hurt, but it also keeps us from being known. When we hide behind perfectionism or indifference, we shield ourselves not just from pain, but also from love, connection, and meaning. Imagine meeting someone who seems to have it all together, someone who never admits to struggling or needing help. It's hard to connect with that person because their perfection feels untouchable. Now think about someone who says, I'm scared, or I made a mistake, or I don't know what to do. That kind of honesty is disarming. It invites connection because it's real. Armor often shows up in subtle ways, and sometimes we don't even realize we're wearing it. Perfectionism is one of the most common forms. It says, if I'm perfect, no one can criticize me. But perfectionism isn't about striving for excellence. It's about fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of not being enough, and it's exhausting. Another form of armor is disengagement, pulling back from relationships or opportunities because the risk of rejection feels too great. Disengagement tells us, if I don't care, I can't get hurt, but it also leaves us feeling empty and isolated. One of the most deceptive forms of armor is pretending we're invulnerable. We tell ourselves, I'm fine, even when we're not. We brush off our feelings, convincing ourselves that they don't matter. This kind of armor might make us feel strong in the moment, but over time, it disconnects us from our emotions and from the people who care about us. It's a lonely way to live. Choosing authenticity over armor isn't easy, especially in a world that often rewards toughness and self-sufficiency. Society teaches us to value strength and resilience, but it rarely acknowledges that true strength comes from authenticity. It takes courage to admit when we're struggling, to ask for help, or to let others see our imperfections. But these acts of vulnerability are what create real connection and trust. Being authentic doesn't mean spilling your deepest secrets to everyone you meet. It's not about oversharing or exposing yourself recklessly. Instead, authenticity is about being honest with yourself and others in a way that feels true to who you are. It's about setting boundaries and being intentional about who you let into your inner world. Sometimes authenticity means saying, I'm not okay, and trusting the right people to hold space for you. Other times it means admitting, I don't have it all figured out, and giving yourself grace in the process. The challenge of choosing authenticity over armor is especially pronounced in relationships. Whether it's with a partner, friend, or colleague, authenticity requires vulnerability, and vulnerability feels risky. What if they don't understand? What if they judge you? These fears are valid, but they shouldn't dictate our choices. When we approach relationships with authenticity, we create space for genuine connection. We give others permission to be real with us too. And this is where authenticity becomes a powerful force. When we drop the armor, we discover that we're not alone. Our struggles, fears, and insecurities are not unique to us. They're part of being human. Authenticity bridges the gap between me and you. It says, I see you, and I want you to see me too. This kind of connection is what makes life meaningful. At its core, the choice between armor and authenticity comes down to a question of values. Do we value comfort, or do we value growth? Armor keeps us comfortable, but it also keeps us stuck. Authenticity, on the other hand, invites growth even though it's uncomfortable. It challenges us to confront our fears and embrace our imperfections. It asks us to take risks, to face uncertainty, and to trust that we're enough just as we are. Choosing authenticity over armor is not a one-time decision, it's a daily practice. It's choosing again and again to show up as our true selves, even when it feels easier to hide. It's learning to sit with discomfort, to lean into vulnerability, and to trust that the reward, connection, belonging, and self-acceptance is worth the risk. We live in a world that celebrates strength, control, and independence. From the boardroom to social media, the message is clear: to succeed, we must be unshakable. Show no cracks, admit no doubts, and always maintain the appearance of invincibility. This illusion of invincibility, the idea that we must be impervious to pain, failure, or vulnerability, is seductive. It promises protection from life's uncertainties and shields us from the judgment of others. But like all illusions, it comes at a cost. At its core, the illusion of invincibility is rooted in fear. We fear being seen as weak or incapable. We fear rejection, criticism, and failure. To cope, we construct a facade of invulnerability, presenting a polished, untouchable version of ourselves to the world. We wear this mask because it feels safer to say, I've got it all together, than to admit, I'm struggling, but behind this mask, the truth is often much more complex. One of the most significant dangers of chasing invincibility is that it disconnects us from ourselves. When we suppress our emotions or deny our vulnerabilities, we cut ourselves off from the parts of us that make us human. Sadness, fear, doubt, and even joy become emotions we push aside because they threaten the image of control we've worked so hard to maintain. Over time, this suppression doesn't make us stronger, it makes us numb. We lose touch with our authentic selves, living in a state of constant performance rather than genuine presence. The illusion of invincibility also isolates us from others. Relationships thrive on connection, and connection requires vulnerability. When we act as though nothing can touch us, we inadvertently create a barrier between ourselves and the people who care about us. Instead of fostering trust, invincibility creates distance. Imagine confiding in someone who always seems perfect, someone who never admits to struggling or needing help. It's hard to connect with them because their perfection feels unrelatable. In contrast, admitting our flaws and fears invites others to do the same, creating a bond built on authenticity. Another consequence of the illusion of invincibility is its impact on mental health. Constantly striving to appear invulnerable is exhausting. It creates an internal pressure to never falter, never show weakness, and never let others see the cracks in our armor. This pressure can lead to burnout, anxiety, and feelings of inadequacy. After all, perfection is an impossible standard. No matter how hard we try, we will make mistakes, face setbacks, and experience moments of uncertainty. But when we're trapped in the illusion of invincibility, we perceive these inevitable experiences as failures rather than opportunities for growth. This illusion is further perpetuated by societal norms and cultural messages. Social media, for instance, amplifies the pressure to appear flawless. We scroll through curated images and success stories, comparing our messy realities to others' highlight reels. It becomes easy to believe that everyone else has it figured out, that they're unbothered and untouchable, while we're the only ones struggling. This distorted perception reinforces the idea that invincibility is not only possible but necessary for acceptance and success. The workplace is another arena where the illusion of invincibility thrives. In professional settings, admitting uncertainty or asking for help is often viewed as a weakness. We're encouraged to project confidence even when we're unsure. But this culture of invincibility stifles creativity and innovation. When people are afraid to take risks or share ideas for fear of failure, progress stalls. Conversely, workplaces that value vulnerability, where employees feel safe admitting mistakes and expressing doubts, foster collaboration, learning, and growth. The illusion of invincibility also affects how we approach challenges and setbacks. When we believe we must be perfect and unshakable, failure becomes something to fear and avoid at all costs. This fear can prevent us from taking risks, trying new things, or pursuing meaningful goals. After all, if we might fail, it could expose the cracks in our invincible facade. But the reality is that failure is a natural and necessary part of growth. It teaches us resilience, adaptability, and the value of persistence. Pretending to be invincible robs us of these lessons, keeping us stuck in a cycle of avoidance and stagnation. It's important to recognize that the illusion of invincibility doesn't just affect how we see ourselves, it also influences how we view others. When we hold ourselves to unrealistic standards of perfection, we often project those standards onto the people around us. We may become critical or impatient, expecting others to be as strong and unbothered as we try to appear. This not only damages relationships, but also reinforces the cycle of invincibility, making it harder for everyone to show up authentically. Breaking free from the illusion of invincibility requires courage and self-compassion. It begins with acknowledging that vulnerability is not a weakness, but a strength. Admitting that we're human, flawed, messy, and imperfect doesn't make us less worthy, it makes us more relatable. It's through our shared humanity that we find connection, understanding, and support. Letting go of invincibility also means reframing our relationship with failure and uncertainty. Instead of seeing them as threats, we can view them as opportunities for growth and learning. This shift doesn't happen overnight, but it starts with small steps, being honest about how we feel, asking for help when we need it, and giving ourselves permission to make mistakes. We must also challenge the societal messages that perpetuate the illusion of invincibility. This means embracing authenticity over perfection, both in ourselves and in others. It means celebrating not just success, but the effort, persistence, and vulnerability that lead to it. When we do this, we create a culture where people feel safe to be themselves, to take risks, and to grow. We live in a world that often prioritizes action, achievement, and strength. Emotions, on the other hand, are frequently seen as weaknesses, things to be managed or hidden away. There is a prevailing narrative that to be successful or strong, one must maintain control, remain unfazed, and never let emotions get in the way. However, the real bravery lies not in denying our emotions, but in allowing ourselves to feel them fully. Feeling deeply, whether it's joy, sadness, fear, anger, or love, requires incredible courage. In a society that often values stoicism and emotional restraint, to allow ourselves to truly feel is an act of vulnerability. It's the willingness to experience the full range of human emotions, knowing that each feeling, no matter how uncomfortable, is a part of the journey toward authenticity and personal growth. The fear of feeling stems from the belief that emotions are something that must be controlled, or worse, that they might overwhelm us. We are taught from an early age to hide certain emotions. Little boys are told not to cry, and little girls are taught to be ladylike, which often translates to being calm, composed, and unbothered. As adults, we might hear phrases like, "Don't take things personally," or "You need to be more professional." These messages suggest that emotions are inconvenient, messy, and something to be avoided at all costs. In response, we begin to shut down our emotional responses, trying to suppress our feelings so that we can function without interruption. But what happens when we bottle up our emotions? Suppression might seem like a way to keep control in the moment, but over time, it leads to emotional exhaustion. Denying our emotions doesn't make them go away. Instead, they build up, often manifesting in ways we don't expect. Stress, burnout, anger, or anxiety can all be traced back to emotional suppression. In the long run, this approach doesn't protect us, it wears us down. The bravery of feeling is about choosing to experience emotions as they come without judgment or fear of vulnerability. When we allow ourselves to feel, we are not weakened, we are strengthened. It takes strength to sit with discomfort, to allow ourselves to cry when we're sad, to admit that we are scared, or to feel anger in the face of injustice. It takes strength to be honest with ourselves about how we truly feel and to accept those feelings without trying to change or suppress them. One of the greatest acts of bravery is allowing ourselves to feel the full spectrum of emotions without dismissing them or trying to escape from them. It's easy to want to bypass the painful emotions, the ones that make us feel vulnerable, ashamed, or weak. But those feelings are part of being human. They carry important messages that help us navigate the world. For example, sadness helps us process loss and grief. Fear keeps us alert to danger or change. Anger can be a call to action when we witness injustice. These emotions are not enemies, but guides that show us where to grow, where to heal, and what matters most. This bravery of feeling is not a sign of weakness. It's an acknowledgement of our humanity. When we allow ourselves to feel, we are not falling apart, we are becoming more whole. Emotions are our internal compass. They point us in the direction of what is important to us. When we feel joy, it's a reminder of what brings us fulfillment. When we feel pain, it's a signal that something needs attention or healing. Every emotion has value, even the ones we find hard to bear. Emotions, if we let them, can lead us toward deeper understanding and personal growth. However, this bravery is not always easy. Sometimes feeling deeply can be uncomfortable, even overwhelming. Fear of vulnerability can make us hesitant to fully experience our emotions. We worry that if we let ourselves feel, we will become consumed by our emotions, unable to move forward. But the truth is, when we allow ourselves to feel, we regain control. We become more resilient, more capable of responding to life's challenges. The active feeling of sitting with an emotion, of letting it wash over us and move through us, is what ultimately helps us release it and move on. This bravery extends to our relationships as well. To be truly connected to others, we must be willing to let down our guard and show up as we are, emotions and all. It's easy to hide behind a facade of strength, to pretend that everything is fine, but that only keeps us distant. True intimacy comes from vulnerability. When we allow ourselves to be open about our feelings, we invite others to do the same. We create space for real connection and empathy. Vulnerability doesn't create weakness, it fosters strength in relationships, allowing both people to be seen and understood. There's also a certain freedom that comes with embracing the bravery of feeling. When we stop trying to control or suppress our emotions, we free ourselves from the weight of carrying them alone. We stop running from discomfort, and in doing so, we can face our emotions with curiosity rather than fear. This curiosity transforms the way we experience emotions. Instead of seeing them as obstacles to overcome, we start to view them as experiences to understand. We stop trying to eliminate sadness, anxiety, or fear from our lives and instead learn to coexist with them in a healthy way. By embracing this freedom, we also open ourselves up to the possibility of joy, love, and gratitude. The more we allow ourselves to feel the difficult emotions, the more we create space for the positive ones. We can't selectively numb ourselves. When we shut ourselves off from the hard emotions, we also dull our capacity to experience the full richness of life. Only by embracing all of our emotions can we truly live fully, authentically, and wholeheartedly. The bravery of feeling is not a one-time act, it's a lifelong practice. It's about choosing each day to honor our emotional experiences and to allow ourselves the space to feel, no matter what that feeling may be. It's about rejecting the false narrative that emotions are weaknesses and embracing the truth that they are essential to who we are as human beings. To live wholeheartedly is to embrace life with a deep, open-hearted commitment. It is to show up in the world as our authentic selves, unafraid of vulnerability, and willing to engage in life with full emotional presence. Wholehearted living is a practice rooted in courage, compassion, and connection. It calls us to embrace the messiness of life, to engage deeply with our emotions, and to show up fully in our relationships and endeavors. Living wholeheartedly is not about perfection, it's about embracing imperfection and being okay with not having all the answers. It's about choosing to engage with life even when it feels uncertain or scary. When we live wholeheartedly, we do so with an open heart, willing to experience the full spectrum of emotions: joy, pain, fear, love, hope, and disappointment. This kind of living asks us to trust that we are enough as we are without the need to constantly prove ourselves to the world. The first step in living wholeheartedly is embracing vulnerability. Vulnerability is not about weakness, it is about the courage to be seen. It is the willingness to expose our true selves, to take risks, and to show up authentically in every situation. For many of us, vulnerability feels risky. We fear judgment, rejection, or being seen as less than, yet vulnerability is the birthplace of creativity, connection, and courage. It is only by allowing ourselves to be vulnerable that we can truly connect with others and experience life in its fullest form. The need for perfection often holds us back from wholehearted living. We believe that to be worthy of love, acceptance, or success, we must present an image of ourselves that is flawless. We strive to meet the expectations set by society, our families, and even ourselves. But the pursuit of perfection is an exhausting, unrelenting path that robs us of the freedom to simply be. It's only when we let go of the need to be perfect that we allow ourselves to be real and embrace life as it is. Wholehearted living also means letting go of shame, the silent, corrosive force that keeps us from fully embracing our true selves. Shame convinces us that we are unworthy of love, belonging, and connection. It tells us that our flaws and mistakes define us and that we are somehow less than because of them. But shame thrives in secrecy, and its power diminishes when we bring it into the light. When we allow ourselves to show up, flaws and all, we begin to unravel the hold shame has on us. We learn to accept that we are worthy of love and connection, regardless of our imperfections. Living wholeheartedly requires us to be compassionate with ourselves. Self-compassion is the practice of treating ourselves with the same kindness, care, and understanding that we would offer to a dear friend. We are often our harshest critics, holding ourselves to impossible standards and berating ourselves for our perceived shortcomings. But true growth and healing come when we learn to treat ourselves with gentleness and patience. It's through self-compassion that we build resilience, allowing ourselves to rise after setbacks without losing our sense of self-worth. Wholehearted living is also about engaging deeply in our relationships. It's about showing up for others with an open heart, willing to give and receive love. In our busy lives, it's easy to become disconnected, distracted, or distant from the people we care about. But authentic connection requires time, attention, and presence. To live wholeheartedly means investing in our relationships, listening deeply, and allowing ourselves to be vulnerable with the people who matter most. Authentic relationships are built on trust and vulnerability. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable with others, we create the conditions for true intimacy. We let go of the fear of judgment and show up as our full selves, knowing that we are safe and accepted in that space. This openness deepens our connections, allowing us to experience the richness of human relationship. Wholehearted living, therefore, is not just about individual growth, it is about cultivating meaningful, genuine connections with others. Another key component of living wholeheartedly is having a sense of purpose. To live wholeheartedly is to engage in the world with a sense of meaning and direction. It's about being aligned with our values and pursuing the things that matter most to us. Whether it's our careers, passions, or the way we serve others, wholehearted living asks us to bring our whole selves to our work and our life's purpose. It means living with intention, being present in each moment, and striving to contribute to something greater than ourselves. This sense of purpose is often closely tied to the work we do. Many of us spend a significant portion of our lives in our jobs or careers. To live wholeheartedly in this space means finding fulfillment in the work we do, whether it's directly related to our passions or simply a way to make a living. But it also means bringing our values into our work. When we feel connected to our work on a deeper level, it fuels our sense of purpose and makes the challenges of life feel more manageable. Living wholeheartedly also calls for embracing the discomfort of growth. Growth is not always comfortable. It often requires us to stretch beyond our comfort zones, confront our fears, and face uncertainty. But this discomfort is a sign that we are moving forward, that we are evolving into the person we are meant to be. Wholehearted living requires the courage to step into the unknown, to take risks, and to trust that we will learn from every experience, whether it leads to success or failure. At the heart of wholehearted living is a deep sense of self-acceptance. It is the ability to look at ourselves in the mirror and accept who we are without judgment or self-criticism. This doesn't mean that we are complacent or stagnant, but rather that we acknowledge our worth and embrace the journey of becoming. It is the freedom to love ourselves exactly as we are, knowing that we are enough and that our imperfections make us whole. To live wholeheartedly is to live with intention, to show up authentically, to embrace vulnerability, and to seek deep connection with others. It is a choice to live a life rooted in courage, compassion, and authenticity. Wholehearted living is not about achieving perfection. It is about embracing the fullness of life joy and sorrow, success and failure, love and loss. It is about living with an open heart and allowing ourselves to feel deeply, to learn from every experience, and to grow into the person we are meant to be. In conclusion, living wholeheartedly is a courageous journey of embracing vulnerability, connection, and authenticity. It is about showing up in the world as our true selves without the need to hide behind perfection or fear of judgment. Wholehearted living requires us to confront our fears, practice self-compassion, and engage deeply with the people and experiences that matter most. It's not a path without discomfort or challenges, but it's through these challenges that we grow, learn, and ultimately thrive. When we live wholeheartedly, we open ourselves to the fullness of life, the highs and the lows, the joy and the sorrow, and discover that it is in the messiness of our humanity that we find our true strength and purpose. Living wholeheartedly isn't just about achieving success or avoiding pain. It's about being present with every moment, embracing our emotions, and connecting with others in a way that is genuine and meaningful. In the end, it's through wholeheartedness that we create a life that is not only richer, but also deeply fulfilling.